Hello, everybody, and welcome back, and thank you for coming back to CNN. Once again, my name is Alex, and I'm sitting here with Peter.
Hey, everybody.
Peter is my
Peter, yeah.
fellow host. I think we're calling him co-host. Makes it sound like he's some kind of secondary, and we can't both be co-hosts, so he's my fellow host. Is that what you call it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't take offense to co-host at all either, but...
Well, in the last episode, you said we were both co-hosts, which makes it sound like neither of us are the host. But we're fellow hosts.
All right. Yeah, okay.
Clearly, we have big egos between us.
Yeah, you can't have two co-pilots.
We had a long 3-hour conversation about who's the co-host and who's the host. I'm joking. Anyway, welcome back to CNN. For those of you who don't know, this is kind of just a show about turning folks on mentally and getting them thinking about topics, bringing things to your attention that may not have been in your sphere of influence before, and just kind of getting you guys thinking about things. We tend to start out the program with just a general topic, and there isn't one prepared today, so we're just going to go ahead and hop right into it.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, we don't have an email question or anything.
Nope. We do have an email for next week, so tune into that one.
I do have one that somebody brought up to me today that was a little mind thought experiment that actually gets used quite often. It's about time travel.
Great.
Right? And if it's kind of like it's like the cure for cancer thing. You know, if you had the cure for cancer, would you use it or whatever? Have you heard that statement?
I think I can deduce what it is from that little blurb.
Right, but it goes into like, you know, it's a very moral decision. And I feel like time travel is almost the same thing. If you had the ability to time travel somewhere, would you use it to redo past regrets? Things like, or do you believe that maybe the decisions you make should be reflections of your current persona, and shouldn't be undone? Or I don't know how you.
So, the time travel physics of it aside, because there's a lot of differing opinions on whether or not you can change the past.
Right, but we're just
talking about hypothetically, yeah. This is a point that I think about a lot, and it comes down to man's need to control. Mm-hmm. And as I say often, every single bad thing that's ever happened has come from some man thinking that he knows best, Mm-hmm. And it's not within our. We're a wonderful species. We're very intelligent. We're really kind and empathetic at times, but for the most part, we don't have the ability to know how actions are going to, trickle out. You throw a rock into a pond and waves go out. If there's several other reeds and rocks in the pond, it's going to cause other waves, and we can't really tell how things are going to go down. Something that seems terrible now could be great later, which could lead to something else terrible. We don't have that ability. We are very stuck here in this time. And just because I find $20 now on the ground, that is checked off on my good things that happened to me checklist, but that could easily turn into a bad thing, and that could morph into a good thing. So seeing events as good and bad and wanting to go back and change them, that's timeless. That's a timeless human endeavor, a timeless human mental experiment. Mm-hmm. But that's not a talent that we have, knowing what's worth changing and what we just did wrong, if anything at all. Buddhism talks a lot about not necessarily viewing things as good and bad, but simply just taking them as they come. Mm-hmm. Because we don't know what is good and bad. We're not granted that ability.
Okay. True. So I imagine that carries over to a personal level for you.
Yeah. I mean, I try to live that way.
So that way you don't have to go back in time to
exactly that way. That I'm not craving the need to go back in time. It comes down to during one of the open mics, I was talking to a young woman in the audience, and I said, if your grandpa, who was in World War II, didn't bend down at this exact right moment, resulting in the death of the soldier behind him, but his survival, you wouldn't be here today. Who would be here today? Things like that. And when you allow yourself to go down that rabbit hole, you find that we don't know what is best. We don't know course of events. People say, like, well, it all worked out in the end. It's like, well, of course, because the universe isn't going to stop just because you found a 20 or because you got into a car accident. Right. In the moment, things are bad. In the moment, things are good. But scaled out, there's no way for us to tell. Even a supercomputer couldn't tell. I mean, judging, there's the idea of, how they control everything. And saying that there's a they gives certain humans far too much intelligence, far too much, saying that they're so superior to you that they know how these intricate social systems will turn out. That if they, put a billboard up here, it's going to make you buy Coke. It's like, well, statistics may say that, but every human being is infinitely more complicated than a particle, and we can't even understand simple events that happen in particle colliders. So, I mean, it's thinking, control. Thinking that we can control things has led to everything negative and a lot of positive things too. So, nothing.
Well, we're not going to make everything sound like it's bad.
No.
I think we tend to gravitate that way at first.
Sure.
But part of me thinks like, if every event in the past makes you the individual that you are in the present, the easy way to find out is to, if you're happy with yourself in the present, you shouldn't want to change anything in the past, even if you have all these regrets and stuff based on, the things that you learned. You learn from experiences. So wanting to go back in time and change all your experiences means that you're going to have current knowledge today, right? You're going to have different current knowledge. I don't know, something that was brought up to me today, and I thought about it because when you're a kid, you're like, I want to time travel. That would be awesome. And as you get to be an adult, you sort of see the implications of your actions and be like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of happy I did this thing back in whenever.
Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah.
No, there's this, at one point in my life, I was in a fight, and the guy I fought broke my front tooth. And I was talking to my dad once, and he said how upset he was that my front tooth was broken and how, I should have beat the hell out of that kid and things like that. And that's all the past, right? And so I said to him, I said, do you hate me? Do you hate me currently? And he's like, no, I love you. Why's it got to be like that? I'm like, no, just come with me, I said, do you hate who I am? Do you hate my children? Do you hate what I've become? And he's like, no, I love you. I love your kids. And it's like, without my tooth being broken in that flight at that exact same day, on that month, in that bus, I wouldn't be who I am today. I mean, if I hadn't, I have a memory of lighting off my very first snake, those terrible little fireworks, those snakes. I have a memory of doing that. If I hadn't lit that snake off, I wouldn't be doing this show right now, because that's the way that these event waves propagate.
Right.
Is that the small, I mean, it's I guess it's the whole butterfly effect, a butterfly flaps its wings, causes a hurricane. In this human world we live in, that is remarkably true. It's so very true. I mean, the thought experiment I used to give myself is we can go to this freeway right here, and I can take a bowling ball and I can roll it down the freeway, right?
Right.
And I can imagine a completely false world. Actually, there's a term for it. It's called I think it's called like false fictions or false factuals. I don't know what it's called, but I can roll a bowling ball down the freeway and I can imagine a false result. I can get close. I might get uncannily close, but it's going to be wrong, and it's going to be set in a certain time period. So 35W, rush hour traffic, I roll a bowling ball. I can imagine what's going to happen. Cars are going to swerve. They're going to crash. People are going to whatnot.
Not the movies.
But it's going. My vision, my prediction only goes so far. It goes maybe about a minute, and even that minute's going to be drastically wrong. It's going to be such a wrong minute, And that's what the question brings up: is how well can humans predict events? Even something like throwing a bowling ball in a freeway. Who knows? Who knows? It's going to affect, let's say, 40 people really directly, and about 200 people indirectly, and several thousand people's, on and on and on and on. There's no way to know if me throwing a bowling ball in 35W is a good thing or a bad thing. It's impossible to know. But in the moment, it was bad. And, who knows how it's going to propagate itself.
Awesome.
What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
About...
I mean, the knee-jerk reaction is to say, I'd go back in time and I would invest in this particular business.
Right. I think I would be dumb enough to give that a shot.
Yeah.
I think realistically, if I hadn't have sat down and talked to you about this whole thing and found out that maybe it wasn't, such a good idea, I might have done that. But it's more to satisfy, it's with the naivety of observance. I'm going to go back in the past. I'm going to look at something that happened with the delusion that my presence there isn't going to affect what's happening, right?
Sure.
And I think that's not true. That's what's going to happen, right? I'm going to go back to some Roman fight, right? And some guy's going to run up and yell something to me in Latin, right? Hand me a spear or something, and I'm going to be like, oh fuck, I totally got, I'm part of the history, right? I'm part of this thing that's happening right now.
Well, it's have you heard of the observer effect in physics? I would suggest people look it up.
Oh, is that the
double slit
has to do
experiment?
with the with
Double
the
slit
light.
experiment.
The
Yeah,
light.
just simply look it up if you haven't heard of it. But it essentially says that us just observing a system affects the system. So you watch like a bunch of ants in the ground doing ant things, and you decide to stop and not interfere, but just watch them. Your presence is affecting it. You can't study a system without affecting it. It's completely impossible. Even down to the electron level. So the double slit experiment essentially says when you measure which slit it goes through, it affects which slit it goes through just by measuring it without interfering with it at all. But essentially having consciousness on it, studying it, measuring it, affects the result on an electron level. And now we're not talking about electrons, we're talking about people and this Latin guy running up to you. But someone looking up and seeing you mid-stroke, or you stinking a little bit, or looking a little bit different, or just your presence, it'll affect things.
Everything.
Yeah, for sure.
So is that true even with, because we have an observance of the universe around us, right? With like Hubble and all these really powerful telescopes of things that are really far away. I mean, you think the same principle still applies there?
That's an amazing question.
Because what I'm thinking of, right, when we're talking about the ants, is the proximity of me to the ants is closer than my telescope to that nebula that's light years away.
For sure.
Right. And so it's very, I don't know, it's interesting to me. I kind of to be honest, I lost a little bit of interest in space when I figured out that all those NASA photographs were like color enhanced, you know?
Oh, yeah.
I was like,
if you ever go to an observatory and look at a galaxy, it's black and white.
oh yeah,
Totally
I
black
was
and white.
pissed.
I know I don't want to have anybody not go to an observatory because I said that. It's beautiful. Looking at an actual galaxy, this ancient light, it's gorgeous, but the color spectrum just simply didn't make it. Just white and black make it to you. And it's black and white and it's still beautiful, but you're not going to look through a telescope and see those. If you like Google nebula right now,
right,
it'll look nothing like that. It'll be black and white. But yeah, that kind of a story I told you a while ago is I used to be really into astronomy as a kid, about an 8-year-old kid or so. And my grandpa calls from the farm and says, "Oh, and on this particular day, you'll be able to see 4 of the planets in the sky." And it was Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Mars. And I'm incredibly excited because in my kid mind, I'm picturing a fantastic world. As a kid, the world's fantastic. So you project in the future fantastical things, right? And so the morning comes and it's 4 a.m. My mom wakes me up. I look outside. I look up and I see some stars. And my grandpa's on the phone. And I say, "I don't see them." And he goes, "Oh, well, they're right there." And my mom points them out. And there's nothing because I'm looking for Jupiter rising like the moon. Not even like the moon, much bigger than the moon. Right. And that goes down to my own ignorance as a kid. But still, space doesn't give you the same oomph and the wow as like a blockbuster movie. It doesn't do that. You have to find that wow inside of you somewhere and then bring that out, because really it's just a bunch of dots far away. And you grab the most powerful telescope, it's just a slightly bigger dot, still just as far away. So that wow has to come from somewhere else. It doesn't come from the visuals, because in our media driven world, we are looking for a fix that nature really can't provide. You've watched Star Trek and you've watched these nebulas up close and these Borg cubes and all these amazing things.
Because our attention spans are just so different now.
I've used a very powerful telescope, and what it gave me needed some help from my imagination and needed some inner bubbling to make it worth looking at.
Okay.
Because you bring a kid to an observatory and you look through here. And he looks, he's like, "What, that gray line?" It's like, "Yeah, isn't that awesome?" Let your eyes adjust, it gets cooler. And then that would, you'd lose interest. But when you add these colors, and you try to get people excited about it. And the colors are accurate from what I know, knowing, because they can tell what elements.
What the materials are.
Exactly, yeah. The colors are accurate, but they're also, they're false. They're false colors. I'm sorry to hear that you're interested in.
No, I don't know. I'm open to the concept.
It's cool, but it does take some internal wow.
I think the parts about space that I think are so cool are like this Kepler planet that we might have talked about a little bit.
Oh yeah, yep.
Right, where it's this, it's a planet, another planetoid or whatever that's has the same specs as Earth. It's like, not. I think it's smaller, so it's maybe a little bit closer to the sun or whatever, but it's
in what's called the Goldilocks zone.
Right.
Isn't that not too hot, not too cold place of a star that's kind of our same size, so life could be there kind of thing.
But it's 500 light years away, right? So that means that if you found it and you're looking at it, right, aren't you then looking at something 500 years ago, right? That's the image that you're seeing right now of the planet, right? It's something that's 500 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it could not be there. It could have a boatload of skyscrapers on it right now, right? It's like it could really, be kind of, your options are open. And that's a part of space that I think is really cool is that, if you built a machine that could travel the speed of light, it would still take you 500 years to get there.
Yeah.
So you're just never, that's the human, there's a limit. There's literally like a travel limit around Earth, right? You can't go beyond this point. But we can see beyond it. And I don't think there's I think that's one of the only instances where we have a power of observance beyond, our physical ability to
our
do
zone of
about
effect.
it.
Well, I wonder, if you can look deep down inside of atoms and affect those things, who's to say that you can't affect things from a distance? Who's to say what's actually causing the effect? I think it's understood that it's instruments, but there's an Ani DeFranco song called "What If No One's Watching," and it's it's the idea that maybe feeling like you're being watched all the time affects your actions. Right. So what about actually being? If we found a civilization, we are observing them with our hyper amazing telescopes, and we could see people tacking signs to churches and things like that. Well, would that affect people's actions? I wonder. There's the feeling of being watched. We've all felt that. Like, I feel like someone's watching me right now. It's like, well, it'd be nice to know what that is if science has an idea of what that means. But anyway, fun talk as always. Thanks for staying with us. We will be right back after a short break with our macro portion. I'm going to go ahead and take the stage and do a macro portion. So we'll be right back. Thanks so much.
It's quite literally true that we are stardust. In the highest exalted way one can use that phrase. And so I feel, and I use words. I bask in the majesty of the cosmos. I use words, compose sentences that sound like the sentences I hear out of people who had revelations of Jesus.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to C&N. Alex is, like you said before, going to take the stage and proceed with our macro section of the show now. So I'm kind of excited to hear what he's got cooking.
Thank you, Peter.
Absolutely.
In our last episode, I ventured into the realm of humans being the consciousness of the universe. And I'm not the first person to say this, and I'm not the last person to say this, but that doesn't make it any less or more true and powerful to me, that we are conscious beings the same way that the sun is a fusion part of the universe and a comet is a shooting part and the moon is a rocky part. We are the consciousness of the universe. And what does that mean? Now, there's a little known fact that the Earth was once a molten ball that could not support any life. But once it could support life, once life was a possibility on its surface, life sprung up instantaneously. It was instant that life came to be. It's as if the universe cannot wait to make itself manifest. As if the universe is just always chomping at the bit to become something, to be. And put some kind of sensory part of itself into the world so that it can look and it can see. Even a bacteria has senses in a way, and they're not like ours, but even a bacteria has senses. So sentient beings cannot wait. The universe cannot wait to turn itself into a sentient creature. What you have to find is this common thread that every sentient being shares. And this common thread isn't what we eat. It's not how we reproduce, because all those things vary greatly, from mosquitoes to bacteria to rabbits, chimpanzees, humans, and kangaroos. All those things vary so much. But the one thing that we all have in common is propagation and survival. We all want to survive. We all want to make more of ourselves. So what does that say? That every single time the universe makes itself manifest, it wants to make more of itself. It wants to keep going. Now, I don't have an answer for this question, but my goal is to turn you guys on to that idea. That's the only consistent thing that we all have in common, is that when the universe makes itself manifest, it wants to continue, which is an absolutely wonderful, wonderful idea to kind of get your brain working. So when you put those two things I just said together, the moment there could be life, there was life. And every time there is life, it wants to keep on living. That is the only direct will that we can be sure of the universe. That is the will of the universe, that it continue and that it gets to be as soon as possible. That's worth thinking about. I have no further insight on that topic, and I really hope that someone hears this and kind of gives me their idea of it. Because as I was saying before, send me an email, take a shot. Whatever you think is what the universe is thinking about this topic. Because, as I like to say, you and I are part of this universe. The same way that your fingernail is part of your hand and your hand is part of your arm, you and I are part of this. We're not strangers. We're not strangers from some foreign land that found ourselves on this planet. You and I are the universe, and the universe is us. Well, thank you all again for listening. We're going to be back after a short break to take on Peter's micro section. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you awaken from this illusion, and you understand that black implies white, self implies other, life implies death, or shall I say, death implies life, you can feel yourself not as a stranger in the world, not as something here on probation, not as something that has arrived here by fluke, but you can begin to feel your own existence as absolutely fundamental.
Welcome all of our valued listeners back to C&N. My name is Alex, sitting here with Peter, and Peter's going to take us into his micro section now. So take it away, Peter.
Hey, thanks, Alex. So one of the issues I think that I was going to tackle last week was about media framing. Unfortunately, I'm going to roll that over to next week. So today's Where Are They Now section has to do with revolutions. And the reason I bring this up is because there was as Facebook tends to do, it creates these instigative pockets of conversation for people. In this case, my boss at work actually said, he said a comment kind of about the whole meat eating thing and how we should kind of cut back on it. And it wasn't offending anybody at all, right? But as people do, people comment on it, people re-comment on it. There's 15 people who have nothing to do with the argument comment on it. So at some point along here, this leads to the idea of there will not be change without violent revolution, right? Was what I was getting from this story as he was relaying it to me. So I want to kind of give people a little bit of background information before I dive into this. Revolution, as the dictionary states, is a forcible overthrow of government or social order in favor of a new system. And so I actually was curious, how many of these buggers are there? How many revolutions? And this is like, I went on Wikipedia and they're like, this is an incomplete list, but it's the most complete one you're going to find.
So we're talking about throughout
human history.
Recorded human history.
And you'll notice, and I have a theory as to why this is, but from 2740 to 45 BC, right, there are 20 major, considered not necessarily violent revolutions, but major changes of government, right? 20 or attempted changes.
Sure.
So from the year 1 to 999 AD, the next 1,000 years, there are 56.
Interesting.
So the next 1,000 years after that, there are 81. They actually split it into two groups. It goes from 1,000 to 1,500 is 33, and then 1,500 to 1699 is 48. So combined, that's 81. 1,700 to 1,799 is 29. So it drops back down in the next 100 years.
Wow.
Right. And 1800 to 1849 is 51, right? And so combined with 1850 to 1899, 48, you have 99. So there's 100. Then we get into the 20th century. and it goes by a decade. There's so many, right? So we're at in recent history, in the 20th century, there are 264.
Yikes.
Right? And so far, for the first 14 years that we have experienced 34 for this century. And
so what was the previous number again? You said 200?
264. So what I consider recent history, meaning the 20th and 21st centuries, there have been 298. So my hypothesis as to why this is, originally, was maybe people, there's more people, for one thing. Right. So that makes it more possibilities, right? It's getting crowded. But, there might be a possibility that we're writing things down, more than we used to and stuff like that. So the only reason I bring this up is, why do people have revolutions, right, Peter? Why do we, whatever? The most common is actually wealth and resource distribution. That's from ask.com, for those of you who are familiar, right? Common causes of revolution in history generally include inequalities of wealth or power. So, as this guy's saying, major change in the meat market, whatever, capitalism, people demand meat, and the only way we're going to change it is to have a violent revolution, is not necessarily accurate, because that's like a behavioral change and a market change based on a resource change, or a resource, distribution inequality. So the United States had, besides the American Revolution, right, since then, has not had too many violent changes of power. I think we might have talked about this before, Alex, that we've changed power, 43 times or 44 times? Now,
with very few
peacefully, relatively
bloodshed,
peacefully. We haven't had any major deals.
There was that one little Civil War accident.
Right.
Who's counting that?
Right. And that might actually be on this list. But I'm talking. So I'm talking about. No, you're right. You just fucked my shit up again. So.
No. I mean, I wonder if that counts. I mean, it wasn't successful. Do non-successful revolutions count in this list? You'd have to assume
this is actually now. This list actually counts. Yeah, revolutions and rebellions within countries. So Civil War, because they split it beforehand, may be on the war category and not the revolution category. Maybe. I don't know that for a fact. But this list counts successful and non-successful, but what it doesn't do is repeated attempts.
Okay.
So like if I'm in China and I go, I'm going to throw this place over, and it gets quashed, right? And then the next year I go, I'm still going to throw this place over.
Right, one more time.
The same guy, that counts as one on the list.
Okay.
Right, even though it's two different instances. So a lot of people, right, when hearing about this whole, right now it's kind of, it's relatively common knowledge to people that we have a pretty insane wealth disparity. Right, the difference between the really rich and the poor in this country, right, is higher than it has been before, or something.
I heard of that any civilization.
Of any civilization,
history.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I heard recently.
Interesting. Okay, so these people go, we're so overdue for one. Why hasn't it happened yet? Okay, so here's my reasons.
I am very excited
for
right
why
now.
It hasn't happened yet. Now, my first one is that maybe not enough time has elapsed. The United States is a very young country. From 1776 to 2014, that's only 238 years that we've been around. Comparatively, I was going to bring up China and Egypt, and then people would be like, well, great, asshole, tack on 4,000 years. So I'm picking a more, run-of-the-mill, not run-of-the-mill, that's a bad word, regular country, right? One that we might not think of very often. So I picked Spain, right? And Spain, not realizing that the start date of Spain is actually quite hazy because of the whole, Reconquista and the Moors and all that. So we called it 1469 for the purposes of that was the marriage of the two halves, right? To make it kind of a whole, recognizably what it is today. To 2014 is 545 years.
Okay.
So it's been around a lot longer. The other thing is Spain. The reason I brought up Spain as an example is that it is going through a period of, pseudo revolution right now. There's a lot of rioting going on, and part of that I was thinking of. I don't, the reasons for that have been kind of all over the board for people, But they also have a little bit more comfortable populace with the idea of revolution because of their recent history with fascism, right? For Francisco Franco from 1939 to 1975 through World War II, right, was kind of a fascist. That's like 1975 is like yesterday for a lot of people. You know, that's a really close date in history. Okay. So back to the United States, never doing it, right? It's like France, they raised the retirement age, right? 62, people were flipping cars over, right? 66 or whatever it was. Okay. So, yeah, so the one is that we're a young country. The second thing that I guess I would bring up is this federalism that we have, which I wish I'd have brought my 30-second politics book because I could have used it right now. But I actually do have the Legal Information Institute from Cornell University Law School up to explain to us what federalism is. And it is a system of government in which the same territory is controlled by two levels of government. Generally, an overarching national government governs issues that affect the entire country, and the smaller subdivisions govern issues of local concern. So
kind of like states' rights.
Right. So, for instance, Governor Walker in Wisconsin was around for a while, right? And that got kind of a lot of people riled up in Wisconsin. That's a hot thing, right? But in Minnesota, right, if you asked a Minnesotan, hey, what do you think of Governor Walker? They'd be like, what? Right there, because he's not here. He's in Wisconsin, right? Yep. But it's the same country. But because they gave it a different name, a different judicial body, right, for federalism, we're probably less inclined to sympathize with people from other states as easily as we would our own, just by basis of the label. Now, remember, this is like personal speculation.
No, I'm loving it.
So this is personal speculation.
No, this is great.
Okay. So the third instance that a lot of people, or that I would consider to a lot of people, is that we actually have a very large military budget comparatively with other countries, right? And we have a large anti-riot, strong police force and things like that. So physically, it would be difficult for that to happen. Also very dangerous. But I think the most important, and this is where I'm getting to bringing it back to Chipotle and Netflix for our first episode, was individualism. And in Europe especially, they have a lot of, it's like cities were built before cars. This is true for a lot of parts of the world, right?
Sure, yeah.
And here in the Midwest, that's generally not necessarily the case, maybe on the East Coast.
The cities were built, but they were also rebuilt.
Right, but I would say that a lot of places in the United States were built around cars, and it really affects the way that people talk to each other, look at each other. There's not really a lot of marketplace. There's not markets that you would gather. You're not in a bar that's 500 years old that dude's grandpa helped build.
So you're saying where you find the grid, you find separation, individualism.
Right, exactly. So, so bringing that back, and once you have individualism, then you can cater to people's interests, individually instead of collectively, right? Because we all know somebody operates, everybody operates a lot stronger when they're unified. That's the idea, is when you get a group of people, working together, it can also be very dangerous. Mob mentality is very dangerous. But yeah, we have such a culture based around individualism that's been ingrained in everybody, that it's very unlikely, I would say, but not impossible, that we would run through some kind of dangerous revolution. So now that we've established that, we also have to think about what happens after that, right? Because so many countries have fallen prey to, right, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. You've heard of that?
Sure.
We kicked out the old guy. Now what do?
I heard the lyric of the song, yeah.
Yeah.
The old boss.
Yeah, so I'm bringing that in to sort of be like, before, to anybody, any of our listeners who are hot on the seat of their pants right now, to get moving, to have a plan before we move, right? And maybe hash out things that you think are worth that, because I don't think everything. I think the snap mentality is like, I'm mad, I'm gonna go burn something. I'm gonna go whatever, and that's that individualism speaking again, right? Because what you're gonna do is burn down the mailbox of your neighbor's house, right, or whatever.
Call that revolution.
You're gonna run outside and you're gonna cause some damage to whatever's nearest to you, right? Is the idea. At least in this instance that I'm saying right now, if somebody gets really mad but they don't necessarily have a cause or people behind it and just want to do some damage, right? It's a series of like little things.
Yeah, if I break someone's local shop, I'm only punishing that person and maybe the insurance company. Nothing's getting done, though.
Exactly. And so, I guess my reason for coming up with this is that, is violent solutions are such a part of American culture, but not necessarily a part of American mentality, which is the weird paradox. It's like so many movies are, have that as a component where it's like, oh, bad, really mean bad guy deserves to have a really agonizing death. Oh, remember Nixon? Yeah, that guy was funny. I saw that meme, where it's like, so we're just so, I don't know. We just need a direction. We do. And
for sure. Now, the part of it that I struggle with is how much does resources come into play? Part of the French Revolution was based on actual hunger, not this metaphysical hunger, and actual thirst, not this metaphysical thirst. We are very well taken care of. I mean, right now, I have a donut in front of me that I'm not going to finish because I don't want the calories. And those aren't the words of someone who's in a society that's ready for revolution.
Yeah,
I have too much food.
No,
everywhere I look, everybody is quite a bit overweight. That's not just specifically the Midwest. I mean, even Minneapolis Minnesota's a pretty healthy place. But everyone's a little overweight. We're very well fed. We're very well taken care of. We have this Chipotle and we have this Netflix.
Yep.
So do you think it'll take actual starving? When we look at this difference of income between the rich, you can't even call what the rich have income, right?
Right.
It's just their lives. Yeah. They don't even use the word money often, I wouldn't bet. But when you look at that and you say, this is wrong. It's like, well, we live in a system where we get the illusion of control that we can vote. I'm wondering how much resources and voting play in quelling any kind of insurrection before it actually comes about.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah.
Is
I want your opinion
the
on that.
ability of voting and stuff. Well, that's what I mean by tying it back. You're right. It's like you need to kind of have a reason for revolting, and if voting is what it takes for you to not do it, if that's like your one criteria for like, as long as I can vote, I'm good, and somebody steals an election and you get mad, right? You get up off the couch and you're like, did you see that? And your buddy's like, what? And you go, okay, all right, I'll get him on the next one, and then they rip off the next election, right? But it takes a large group of people with the same criteria to instill some sort of change.
We have a very short attention span as individuals.
Right. And so getting back to my boss's initial argument, right, everybody cutting out a certain amount of meat on your diet is a revolution, right? It's a non-violent, it's non-governmental change, right? But it's a revolution in the way people think and act. And so he uses this, I'm going to kind of quote him directly here because basically he was like, a lot of people ask me as a meat eater why I shy away from eating beef and pork. And, and he kind of supports it with this article. And the first guy comments, but it's tasty. And so he rebuttals by saying, if tasty, fun, and easy are considered solid rebuttals to potential solutions to global problems, then we have little hope for the future. What do you, where do you draw the line of what is justifiable and what isn't? Mm-hmm. So
yeah, I like to look at the closest thing we came to revolution, I'd say, was the movement in the late 50s, the 60s with Vietnam, and there were kids out in campuses being shot at and being tear gassed, and people doing sit-ins and really trying to make something happen. That kind of it fizzled out because change was delivered little by little, and it was quieted. But what happened when we went to war with Iraq, whether or not you think that's just, the folks that I saw protesting did not think this war was just, but they were protesting on a Saturday, and there was about 11 of them, and they were having a really good time. And they were taking pictures, and it was going up on, it was.
Right.
I don't know if Facebook was a thing then, but even now with the 99% movement, the was the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Occupy Wall Street.
You're taking pictures with your iPhone. You're wearing Nikes. All these different things.
Yeah.
There isn't a they. I'm a big advocate of there not being some kind of all-powerful Illuminati they. But if there is a they must be laughing their asses off at these movements that pop up and that rely on social media and rely on computers and rely on all these different things that give them their power. We're feeding into their power, and these things will fizzle out because our attention spans are little to nothing, because when it comes down to it, I can still eat,
Yeah, no, you're right. You need some sort of, and I'm not saying, that people shouldn't voice their opinions. I would much rather have, 20 people trying to tell people that something is bad than have us all just accept it. That's how this stuff is going to happen. Mm-hmm. But you have to, I think what you need to do is you need to define why it's bad. Right, you need, because like you were saying, it's like, that's bad, right? Well, that's not a good argument. You need, and the universe doesn't define things as good or bad, right? So it's not going to make that decision for you. But inherently, I suppose if everybody was upfront about the whole, reasons for going to war with other countries anytime, right? You might have a vastly different number of people supporting your decision based on that. So you still,
the place where my mind goes is every time you bring up a point about why we should revolt, there's always a very accurate counterpoint. Like, the wage gap is massive. It's not just massive, it's Grand Canyon large. And these people at the top say, I just won at the capitalism game. You're playing the same game as me. Well, then there's the counterpoint of, we didn't start at the same place. We don't have the same amount of moves. And they're saying, we live in a country where you can vote and you can change things. Mm-hmm. So there's always this counterpoint. And I think a lot of what's going on is that there's so many people that are informed, so many different opinions. It's the old line about, herding cats. Like, it's really hard to herd those that are free thinkers and that always have their own opinion and can never really get behind anything. I'm not a sheep. I'm not going to follow. Right. Well, a revolution does require a certain amount of following. It does require.
That's all of it.
Yeah.
That's the whole argument.
Yeah. So when you say, we have to unify, there's always going to be people in the crowd that aren't as into it, I guess, because they're kind of wishy-washy. They're there because Sarah's there and Sarah's hot and I can put this on my Facebook. I was part of the revolution, right? When you're revolting for your own personal PR, I feel that when the tear gas comes out, people are going to split. There's actually a video online of Occupy Wall Street. Remember when that cop went down the line and sprayed all those kids?
I didn't see it.
There's an actual video of it. You should check it out.
Okay.
But there's a kid at the end who sees the pepper spray coming, and he just gets up and he's gone. They're sitting on the ground making a human chain. The pepper spray comes out, and this guy stands up and just walks off because he's only there because he wants to get down with Sarah. Right. He's there for the wrong reasons, or he's there maybe those are the right reasons. I don't know, but I feel like there's not the actual hunger necessary for revolution, and there may be someday soon.
Right. Yeah.
The point I've been kind of going off of lately is, the French Revolution happened. Some rich people got beheaded. It would be nice to do it without that. Because what you have is you have the poor, you have the good people. The meek will inherit the earth. You have the good people, but then they start beheading rich people because anger froths up because you watched your kid die of a disease. You're angry. You want someone to suffer for that. Even the movement in India that was, led by Gandhi, there was killing. There was plenty of killing, in Muslim, Hindu killing. And it would be nice if we could. It'd be nice if we could change things drastically with the fewest amount of rich people dying, because the rich people don't think they're doing anything wrong, right?
Right.
And in a way, they're not. They just won the game. It's just now time to reset the game. It's time to play a new game, to start over, start the game over, right?
Right.
Because this game is won. It's won. Right,
I see.
No one from my bloodline, no one that ever.
They won the game.
There's this thing going on Vimeo right now about this book called Capital. Right? Have you seen that? Have you seen the thing on Vimeo? Yeah. It's just a book that really illustrates how big this gap is and how the gap is only going to widen. And there's no new money; it's all just old money being passed down. And that we don't even see the rich. We don't see. We're still in the mindset that $1 million is really great, right? These numbers are tiny compared to what we're talking about. We're talking about not even numbers, like $1 billion. No. We're talking about huge amounts of money that are not just money, they're also future money, because money makes money, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it's something like, well, the average person I was in a personal finance class in college, and they were saying that for my generation, just to retire comfortably in the future is going to require $11 million. That's how much money I'm going to have by the time I retire to be able to like live the same amount of comfortable retirement that like a baby boomer or whatever is living right now.
I want to throw up now.
Right. It's crazy. And so
I won't even get $1 million.
Yeah. So it's like, so you're right. It's like, oh, 1 million is like a huge thing. It's like, what would you do if you had $1 million, right? Well, I would attempt to then get another $1 million.
I would buy a modest house and be out of money.
Right. Exactly. I would buy a modest house and be out of money. So, I don't know. I mean, and these are all conversations for another day. I was just wrapping up my revolutions and rebellions deal.
That was absolutely excellent.
That was my wrap up. So anyway, thanks so much, Alex.
Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks everybody for listening. My name's Peter. This was this week's Where Are They Now section. And, we're going to take a short break and we're going to come right back after this.
All right, thanks for sticking with us. That kind of marks the end of episode 2 of C&N. It was a great one. We learned about revolution and rebellion. I went on about my piece about the universe's goal and why it wants to propagate itself. And then we had a nice little discussion in the beginning, too. So that's kind of the format of the show we're going for. For those of you who are new to it, we kind of open with something that we call the Average Bears. You may know this, but Peter and I had a previous show called The Average Bear, where we kind of just talked and we spitballed, and it was really great. And we loved that format, but we both had our own individual passions. And mine was the more universal, pull back, what we're calling the macro viewpoint, and Peter's is the more, what are humans doing now? That's why he calls it Where Are They Now? It's the more micro viewpoint. And so we split the end of the show between him and I.
And, please feel free to email us with any questions you might have. That will take place at the first part of the show. And it can be really anything. We've covered this before. Anything that you're interested in hearing mine or Alex's opinion about. I do believe we have one for next week.
We definitely do.
And so, we won't get to any of yours next week, but, we'll get to them eventually. We do read them all.
And episode 4, I think we'll have our very first guest on ever.
Sweet.
Episode 3 is going to have an email. That email address is cndnpodcast@gmail.com. That is CANDN podcast@gmail.com.
We should have made it candy.
Yeah,
Candy podcast.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard one to say. CANDN podcast@gmail.com. Send us anything. What you liked, what you didn't like. We love getting emails. We read every single one of them, and it's good to hear feedback, both positive and negative. Thank you once again immensely for listening. This has been CNN. I'm Alex.
And my name is Peter.
And thanks for listening.
Yeah, we'll catch you next week.
Bye-bye.
The old